care about politics. And it is so depressing to me as somebody who spent 7 years in the Justice Department trying to make sure that the Justice Department worked the right way. What he's proving in that interview is that the president may have in fact been right to have fired him.
Okay, so they're both talking about politics. Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, lifelong Democrat, and the author of a great book. It's called Trumped Out. Check it out. Professor,
Trumped Up, there it is.
What did you make of Mr. Comey's performance last night?
Well, you know, I agreed with one thing he said, and that is, let's leave it to the voters. Let's not go to impeachment. Let's not try to criminalize political differences. That's what I've been arguing about for a long time. But I really thought he demeaned the FBI by leaking material about unsubstantiated allegations, by trafficking in gossip. I call it the leak.
But that was the only way, that was the only way he could get the word out, and he wanted to start the special prosecutor ball rolling.
But he had no courage or guts to speak himself in front of the TV. He laundered it through a law professor and gave the worst excuse last night. He said, well, there were so many journalists, I didn't want to give it to one journalist, so I leaked it through my law professor friend, the New York Times. The one thing it showed yesterday...
Isn't that bizarre? I stopped right there. I said, who ever heard of that? That's called an exclusive. You have a friend in the business, just call up a reporter, say, I want you to run the...
Right.
It's called
also, you know what it showed last night? This is a man without courage. He didn't have courage to tell the president to his face he was wrong. Instead, he leaked it. He didn't have courage to walk out of the meeting, which he said was an improper meeting. When he was in the presence of the president, he showed no courage. Look, I think one of the reasons that the president talks to me from time to time is I tell him exactly what I think at every point in time. I told Obama what I thought. I told Clinton what I thought. If you're the head of the FBI, you got to look the president in the eye and you have to say, Mr. President, you're wrong.
Professor, this is what the president just tweeted. He said, Comey drafted, this is the first time he's talked since the interview, Comey drafted the crooked Hillary exoneration long before he talked to her, lied in Congress to Senator G. Grassley, then based his decisions on her poll numbers. Disgruntled, he, McCabe, and the others committed many crimes.
So now I'm going to tell the president, Mr. President, you're dead wrong.
Why?
He did not commit many crimes. Let's not try to criminalize what he did. If you don't like what Comey did, come on this show. Say you don't like what Comey did, but don't try to invent crimes against your political enemies. The president shouldn't be doing it. Comey shouldn't be doing it. The special counsel shouldn't be doing it.
Can I ask you to review his timeline? He says he gets this information about these emails and he's looking through them. There's an investigation going on, at least to the New York Times. The New York Times gets blitzed by the Hillary Clinton camp and they say, pull that down. There's no investigation going on. But there was an investigation going on. And then when he sits down with Loretta Lynch says, call it a matter, not an investigation. That prompted him to go out on his own.
All terrible stuff.
He says, in the spring, I started drafting the letter. I told Sally Yates to start drafting the letter. He said, why? Why would you do that? He said, well, because we know investigation was going in a certain way. But you hadn't talked to Hillary Clinton yet. He said, well, we knew. Unless she lied, we knew we were going to get. Unless she lied. She's not under oath. Why wouldn't she say something that would bend the truth if the truth made her look bad?
Look,
how could you draft an exoneration letter before talking to her and then say that's the proper procedure?
It's not the proper procedure, but it's not criminal. The point is, in order to charge somebody with a crime, you have to find something that's criminal. Look, one of the good things for President Trump about this whole Comey thing is it brings the attention back to obstruction of justice and collusion, where the president is safe. His vulnerability is in New York, in the Southern District. But you know what the good news for him is in the Southern District? They can bring Sessions back. He's not any longer recused when it comes from the separate investigation in New York, because that's unrelated to the Russia matter. And that gets Rosenstein. Sure. He recused himself, Sessions, because he was a potential subject or witness in the Russia investigation. New York is not about the Russia investigation. It's about Cohn. It's about pre-presidential activities. Sessions is the Attorney General of the United States. He's back in charge of the investigation, not Rosenstein.
He could take a hold of that. If he's watching right now, that according to Alan Dershowitz, you did touch on whether or not something, what the president has engaged in regarding, firing Comey and stuff like that. A number of Democrats have said that's obstruction of justice. Well, that's your opinion. Here's what Mr. Comey said last night on television. Watch this, Professor.
Was President Trump obstructing justice?
Possibly. I mean, it's certainly some evidence of obstruction of justice.
At some point in your mind, as you're writing these notes, have you shifted to collecting evidence of a possible crime?
Well, yes, in a sense, I continued to believe that there was force to the FBI General Counsel's argument that we're going to have to look at the president. You're inevitably going to look at his conduct because he's the head of the campaign.
Do you think the Russians have something on Donald Trump?
I think it's possible. I don't know. These are more words I never thought I'd utter about a president of the United States, but it's possible.
So it's not legal. He doesn't say probable. He says possible.
Well, that's just wrong. You don't traffic in speculation, particularly when you're the former head of the FBI, who was presumed to know everything. And when he says on national television, it's possible, people say, yeah, that's probably
we haven't found anything?
He should have said there is no evidence. We found no evidence the Russians have anything on him. We found no evidence to support the Steele dossier. We have no evidence.
Yeah.
That's what he should say. He's in the evidence business, not in the speculation business. But remember, Comey said to Congress, the president was right in firing him.
All right.
He was legally authorized to fire him.
So he's saying one thing. President said that never happened. Then he's saying one thing about Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch says that never happened.
Look, first of all, in my view of the Constitution, it doesn't matter. The president could have told Comey, I direct you to stop the investigation of Russia because it's hurting the United States. The president has the authority under the Constitution to do that. It ought to change. Congress ought to try to make the FBI an independent organization. Right now, it's part of the Justice Department, which is part of the cabinet, which is part of the unitary executive. The president's in charge.
Okay, let's talk about it. At 2 o'clock today, Michael Cohen is going to be in court. What is at stake? What should Donald Trump be looking at? Because he's also going to ask the judge to block the to block this judge from reviewing documents seized in the Cohen raid.
They have a very good judge, a former student of mine, Judge Kimball Wood. She's tough and she's smart. She ought to take over this taint team. She ought to be the one to look at everything seized in the Cohen office and say, this is confidential lawyer-client.
Will she be fair?
This is not.
Is he a lawyer-client? Is he Donald Trump's lawyer? Does he have to prove that today?
The government has to prove he's not, essentially. There is a legal relationship.
Right.
There is a lawyer-client relationship. It doesn't apply to every conversation, but it presumptively applies to every conversation.
How does that affect the documents taken from the 4 locations?
Well, that's why you need a judge. You don't want FBI agents going through these documents and reading material that will eventually turn out to be lawyer-client privileged information.
That's why you say Kimball Wood, the judge herself, to do it. What about this? Where's the ACLU when it comes to this? Because this is the kind of thing that they would have their hair on fire over.
If this were Hillary Clinton, they'd be raising money left and right, defending Hillary Clinton's right. But now they're raising money left and left by attacking Trump and putting the attack on Trump over defending our civil liberties. Why do you think I'm here all the time? Why do you think I'm speaking up in favor of the rights of a man I voted against? Because the ACLU is dead in the water. Who's ever heard of the ACLU coming in, not only justifying, defending, but applauding a raid on a lawyer's office, which may very well have taken material that was classified lawyer-client?
ACLU is a political operation?
It is absolutely political. It is a partisan, hard-left political organization which no longer cares about the civil liberties of all Americans. It is agenda-driven, money-driven, and anti-Trump-driven.
Lastly, what's the worst-case scenario of what can emerge from the Cohen session today?
Well, the worst thing is we don't know. I mean, we have no idea what the business relationships between the president and Cohen were. Over time, we have no idea. Look, I've said for months and months, the president has nothing to worry about in terms of Mueller. His big concern is pre-presidential activities. That's how they got Clinton, the blue dress. And the president should never, under any circumstances, testify.
But the blue dress was during his administration.
But what happened, it was started by looking at Paula Jones and all the women that were prior to his administration, Whitewater prior to his administration. See, the president has constitutional protections for what he did as president. He has far fewer protections for what he did as a business person. There's no evidence he did anything wrong, but that's where his vulnerabilities lie.
Professor, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
A Fox News alert, former First Lady Barbara Bush no longer seeking medical treatment after a series of hospitalizations.